How's it going, everyone? I hope you're all well. Welcome to Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports, and sports into something that we don't talk about here. My name's Matt.
And my name's Dyl, and today we get to talk about a small movie with a big, in my eyes, a question mark behind big heart, and that is To Leslie. Finally, we both lay eyes on this movie, the much talked about, the much renowned, the much campaigned movie that got Andrea Riseborough a Best Actress nomination. So, I guess to start things off, Matt, what did you think about To Leslie? Just general thoughts.
So, To Leslie has been talked about so much. I first heard about this movie when, every week I go through every movie released on Metacritic that week, and I write down their scores and everything. I first took notice of this film when I saw it got like an 85 Metacritic score, and I was like, wow, that's crazy high. And then Andrea Riseborough, she got the Indie Spirit nomination, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I started to see people in YouTube comments being like, Andrea Riseborough is amazing in this movie. You should check it out. And so I've been waiting to see this for a long time. I downloaded this movie in December to watch, and I just didn't get around to it. And then here we are. This is a movie that follows Leslie, a character who deals with alcohol addiction and who has kind of thrown her entire life away. She was a lottery winner. She had everything, and then she pissed all of her money away on booze, and she ruined her connections with her family and her community. And this film follows as she returns to her hometown, marred by her failures of the past. My general take on this movie is I do think it's a very lovely film. We've seen this type of movie tons of times before, but the thing that struck me about this is we haven't seen this exact film. Usually when we see these kind of self-destructive addiction films about someone ruining things with their family over and over again, usually it's a child. We saw this last year with 4 Good Days, with Mila Kunis being a drug addict and Glenn Close being her mother trying to save her. We saw Beautiful Boy with Timothée Chalamet being a meth addict and Steve Carell being his father trying to save him. Ben is Back. Lucas Hedges was the drug-addicted teenager, and Julia Roberts was trying to save him. I don't think I've seen a movie before about a mother who is addicted and whose child is trying to be there to support her. That was what made this unique, and that's where I think the heart in this movie comes from, especially because through the story, it's not just a story about someone self-sabotaging and ruining their own life over and over again. It's a movie about someone who genuinely wants to get better. And that's where I think that this movie and the love for it comes from. That's why I do agree that it has a giant heart. Do I love this movie? I'm not over the moon with it, although personally, I do think that Andrea Riseborough absolutely deserves her nomination. She is spectacular in this movie. She plays the desperation so well. She plays the deception so well. There's so many things that she's doing in this movie that I think are just out of this world phenomenal. So personally, I like it a lot more than I expected to. Is it worth an 85 on Metacritic though? I don't think so. It's just a very solid addiction movie. But I know you were a little bit less high on this than I was. I gave this a pretty strong 7 out of 10. What was your take on it?
Honestly, listening to you talk about right there kind of raised my thoughts about this movie some more. You shed some light on some stuff I was personally a little mixed about, and I think helped because, like you mentioned, how it takes it from a different angle. It's not the destructive kid, it's the destructive parent, which is a very true thing that's out there that you don't really see on film as often. When you do see it, it's more of an abusive parent, like physically, not emotionally. And I thought that was a very interesting take. I also thought the ensemble here was very well. I know Riseborough's getting most of the acclaim, but like Allison Janney as, I think it was her friend, maybe a sibling. I didn't really grasp that the most, but someone that she knew from her hometown I thought was really good when she popped up. Stephen Root I thought was a very strong standout as someone who helps Leslie along her journey. And then I've never seen the actor before, but Owen T, who played her son, I thought was very good in his limited screen time.
He was in It. That's okay. You have seen him before. He was one of the bullies in It. And so, yeah, no, he's really doing. He did great in that film. I was very impressed. He
did. My biggest issues with To Leslie comes with its runtime because, well, I do agree that it does pack a lot of heart and it's trying to do a lot. because of how small the movie is, it can feel monotonous and you're repeating the same tracks at a time, which I can understand is the angle to like say like, hey, she's just stuck in a cycle. She's going to keep doing the same things. But after a while, you're like, okay, we get it now. What's the next step? And without diving too much into it, once you get to the ultimate conclusion, it feels very rushed. And you spent, I would say this is an hour 58 long movie. You spend an hour 40, 45 with her cycle, and you get about 5 to 10 minutes of the conclusion. And I would have liked to see a little bit longer of the conclusion or a little bit shorter of that continuous cycle. However, listening to you talk about it did raise parts of my thoughts. Originally, I would have given this a very medium 6, so I'd be up to a very strong 6, maybe even a light 7. I thought Riseborough was great. While she would not be in my personal 5, I think she's very strong in this. I think even if you take like the top 8 actresses who are in competing, she would be either my number 5 or my number 6. So I think she's very good. Nomination worthy in my book. However, stacked field this year. I know I keep saying that every time we talk about this category. I'm just so amazed how usually people are like, oh, the best lead actress category is so weak. This is always the worst category. And this year, I think it's my like strongest category. And you can, like I said, go down to 8. You can even go down to 9 if you want to include Jennifer Lawrence. And that's a stacked lineup.
Yeah. Well, in terms of what you said about it feeling rushed, I think that I agree it feels rushed. I wanted to see a little bit more of her path to recovery. But at the same time, I think the reason why that rushed feeling is effective is because at the end, it leaves you feeling as though you don't know if this is yet another scheme that she's putting on. It kind of puts you in the shoes of her family, how they would feel looking at her buying an ice cream parlor. They might look at that going, it just feels like she's going to go off the deep end again.
Yeah.
And so it kind of puts us in those shoes thinking, is she really going to recover, or are we going to get her kind of sliding again? And so ultimately, yes, it feels rushed, but I see why they did it, to make us feel that same feeling of doubting whether this is truly her recovery, and then realizing, yeah, she actually wants to get better this time. She's devoted to it. She's going to do it this time. But I definitely would have liked to see more of her path to recovery. I agree. Ultimately, though, Andrea Riseborough, she would be just behind Michelle Yeoh for me as my favorite, maybe just even overall performance of the year, leading performance of the year. I think she's phenomenal in this movie. She brings the heart. She brings the complexity of someone who is truly, truly struggling against themselves. It's not just a character who is trying to do deceitful things. It's a character who is trying with every fiber of her being to be good, to fix the mistakes that she knows that she's made in the past, who just keeps falling into the same horrible patterns, horrible mistakes, that same routine over and over again. She delivered the hell out of this performance. We've seen this type of performance before. This is the same yelly type of performance that we see pretty much yearly. But what Riseborough brings is empathy. She cares about this character. She wants us to feel for Leslie, to not view Leslie as the cause of her own demise, but rather a victim of her disease.
I think you put that very well. I think this movie starts off very strong. This movie has a lot of Oscar clips. As you mentioned, this is a very showy performance. So I feel like any time she's on screen, you can use that as a clip. There's a few scenes specifically at the beginning where she's, I would say, at her lowest. I know you can, like, you meet her and then she has about 20, 30 minutes of screen time where she's down pretty bad. But I think the first few scenes you get with her when she's being evicted from her hotel, that is the lowest that we see her at. And I think you get some very strong and powerful, not just voice acting, but also body mannerisms. You can see how broken, how defeated she is. And then I think some of the best just overall scenes are, as I mentioned, with her son, James. I think there's a lot going on there, not just verbally, as I mentioned, but like on the page and nonverbals. You can see like these two people don't really know each other, but they still have a bond because of what their relation is. They haven't seen each other for 6 years, but you can still tell like, hey, these two people still love each other, even if they have no real reason to love each other. And I really appreciate a lot of the scenes with Dutch, and I think it was Royal at the motel later in the movie when maybe Leslie's not on screen, or maybe she's a third character in those scenes. I think they bring a very interesting and much needed dynamic, so you're not being completely like beaten over the head or dragged to the ground by like, hey, she's just going through a cycle. You get some other characters who can relate in some form or another to the struggle, and it may not be alcohol abuse, but other types of struggles, and you can see how people can overcome to see what her future could be like.
Mm-hmm. I think if we're talking Oscar clips, it might be more of a showy scene for Owen Teague, but the scene where he kicks her out of his apartment, I think, is phenomenal. Especially because we see just how broken she is, how hard she tries to convince him that she is innocent, that she's trying to get better, despite the fact that the evidence is right there under her mattress that she's not. That is such a powerful scene, and that's one that I really think could be an Oscar clip, if not for the fact that Owen Teague is the one screaming his lungs out in that scene.
I definitely see that angle for the To Leslie, that this wasn't made for Oscars. It was just a very small budget movie that people just seem to really like. And when I say an Oscar clip, I don't think it's like, oh, they're trying, like, this is what we want to showcase. It just so happens that that's how the characters are in the movie. I think the same thing could go for Till. Another movie I love, Dead Weiler, another performance I love. I think the same could be said there. The whole movie is an Oscar clip. It's just, in my opinion, they're both very good Oscar clip movies. Regardless, though, To Leslie, I would definitely give it a recommendation. While it's not my favorite of the year or anything, it's a very, I guess I have to say it, small film with a big heart.
It sure is. But let us know in the comments. Do you think that To Leslie is a small film with a giant heart? Let us know what you think. And as always, my name is Matt.
And my name is Dyl, and this is Fantasy Filmball.